This deep dive, I gotta say, this is one of those stories that just really makes you stop and think.
Yeah.
Imagine needing specialized care.
Right.
Putting your trust, your family's trust, in a system that's, well, it's supposed to be there to provide it.
Absolutely.
And then you find out it's failing.
Yeah.
And not just like, oh, we're missing a form here or there, but in big ways.
Yeah.
We're talking about the Texas State Supported Living Centers.
Right.
SSLCs for short.
SSLCs. Yeah.
And you sent over some seriously hard-hitting investigative journalism on this.
Yeah. It's not easy stuff to read, but it's so important to understand what's going on.
Okay, so before we even get into it, just to level set for everyone.
Sure.
What are these SSLCs supposed to be doing? Who are they serving?
So these SSLCs, they're designed to care for, as I said, some of the most vulnerable Texans.
Okay.
We're talking folks with intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities, people who need a level of support and care that they might not be able to get anywhere else,
And this isn't just like one person's, blog post or something.
No, not at all.
This is a full-on report from the Texas Watchdog, which listeners might know, they're known for their investigative journalism.
They are, yeah.
They hold powerful entities accountable. They've got a track record, particularly on judicial and consumer issues.
Exactly. They really dig deep. And when they put out a report like this, it's serious.
They've done their homework, yeah.
Absolutely.
So they dug deep into this SSLC system, and what they found, deeply concerning is, putting it mildly.
Yeah, there's really no other way to say it.
So let's not bury the lead here.
Okay.
This isn't just some dry policy debate.
No.
This is about real people's lives.
Right.
And it starts back in 2009.
Okay.
With the Department of Justice investigation.
Wow. Okay, so the Department of Justice, they don't just investigate lightly.
No.
When they step in, that means there have been some pretty serious allegations.
Yeah.
Often we're talking about systemic problems that need to be addressed.
And in these Texas SSLCs, what they found was, shocking is an understatement.
Yeah, it's tough to read.
I mean, the report detailed things like staff members stepping on residents' throats.
My gosh.
Forcing residents into fight clubs for entertainment.
It's awful.
This wasn't, a couple bad apples.
No.
The DOJ found that there was widespread abuse, neglect.
Yeah, and that's why they didn't let Texas off easy,
What do you mean?
So the state ended up having to pay $112 million to settle the case.
$112 million.
Yeah, and they agreed to a whole list of reforms.
Okay, so that's gotta make a difference, right?
You would think so, right? I mean, that's a huge settlement.
You would think $112 million and a mandate to change would make a difference, but and this is where it gets really disheartening.
Yeah.
A follow-up report 5 years later, very little had actually changed.
It's so frustrating.
Many SSLCs were only about 30% compliant with the reforms.
I mean, what's the point then,
It's what were we even doing this for?
Right.
And that word you used earlier, systemic.
Yeah.
That really sticks out.
Yeah. And it's crucial here.
Because it wasn't just, like you said, a few bad actors. Right?
No, the DOJ investigation, it didn't just find bad apples. They found a system that was fundamentally flawed at some level.
And that's terrifying. Because it's not just, we can fire this person, we can retrain this person. It's like the whole thing.
It's bigger than that, yeah.
Which brings us to, I guess, the human cost of all this, and the story of Sean Yates.
Oh, Sean.
A 35-year-old man who was living at the Corpus Christi SSLC.
Yeah, and this is where those systemic failures, they just become, painfully clear.
So Sean had Asperger's, and I think before we go further, it's important to explain what that means in terms of, the care he might have needed.
Of course, yeah. Asperger's is a form of autism.
Okay.
And it can make social interaction and communication more challenging.
Okay. And often people with Asperger's, they thrive on routine, clear expectations.
Gotcha.
It's not a defining negative or anything, but it does mean that the type and the level of care that's required can be very specific.
So you gotta be really tuned in to what that person needs.
Exactly.
So in Sean's case, he had a tendency to wander.
Okay.
Sadly, instead of maybe increasing supervision to keep him safe, the SSLC actually reduced his supervision.
What?
A short time before he went missing.
Oh my gosh.
His body was found a month later in the Corpus Christi Ship Channel.
A month.
A month. I mean, can you imagine the agony of his family?
I can't even fathom.
Not knowing where he is, what happened.
Just awful.
And to add to the tragedy, the investigation into Sean's death revealed a horrifying possibility.
There's a chance he might have been the victim of one of those fight clubs that the DOJ had uncovered earlier.
You're kidding.
And this is, I mean, Sean's case, this is not unique.
No, I was going to say.
There's a pattern here.
Tragically, there is.
Of neglect, abuse, a failure to protect the very people these SSLCs are supposed to be serving.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
I mean, it makes you wonder, like, what is going on in these facilities where something like this could even happen?
Right. Especially after a major DOJ investigation, you'd think.
You would think, right?
Right.
Millions of dollars they're being told to shape up.
Exactly.
And it's still, I mean...
And it's not just about the human cost, which is immeasurable, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But there's also, the financial side of this, which the report really digs into.
Because there's always a money aspect, right?
Oh, always. And in this case, it's pretty shocking.
Okay.
We're talking the average cost to care for one resident in an SSLC, over $210,000 per year.
Hold on, say that again?
$210,000 per year.
Per person.
Per person.
That's more than most people make in a year.
Exactly.
And you have to wonder, if it costs that much, what are they actually spending it on?
Right. Where is all this money going?
Yeah.
The report points to a few things, like high staff turnover, which makes sense.
Okay.
You've got constant training costs, potentially lower quality of care because you've got people who are new all the time.
They're not really experienced with the residents.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of outdated facilities.
Makes sense.
So you've got, extensive upkeep, maybe even complete overhauls needed.
So not only are we potentially talking about a system that's failing its residents, but also failing the taxpayers who are footing this massive bill.
It's a huge amount of money.
It is, yeah.
And it raises the question of, could that money be used more effectively?
I see, mainly, for sure. Right.
Absolutely. And that's where this idea of community-based care comes in.
Yeah, the report mentioned that. Tell me more about how that works.
So community-based care, it's basically a model that emphasizes smaller settings.
Okay.
More integrated settings where people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they can live and receive support within their communities.
So not these big institutions.
Exactly. It's about, helping these folks live fuller, more independent lives.
Okay, so it sounds good, but does it actually work? What's the research say?
The research is really promising. Studies show that for a lot of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, community-based care, it can lead to better quality of life, increased independence.
That makes sense.
Better social integration, even better health outcomes.
Interesting.
And on top of all that, remember that $210,000 figure for SSLCs?
Yeah, hard to forget.
Community-based care can often achieve the same, if not better outcomes at a fraction of the cost.
Okay, so if it's better for the individuals and easier on the taxpayers' wallets, why haven't we fully transitioned to community-based care?
Right. It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Well, there are some hurdles, and unfortunately, they're pretty complex.
Like what?
One of the biggest is just the availability of these services.
You mean there aren't enough options available to meet the need?
Exactly. There are often long waiting lists.
Oh, wow.
Even in areas where community-based care is more established.
So even if someone's a good fit for this and they want it, they could be stuck on a waiting list for, months? Years?
It's a sad reality, and that's if they even know these programs exist.
Oh, right, because if you're coming from a family that, maybe doesn't have access to the best information.
Absolutely. Or the support to navigate the system, it can be really difficult.
That's a huge barrier.
Huge. And then you've got funding issues.
Which the report talked about, yeah.
Yeah, these community-based organizations, they're constantly struggling to secure enough funding.
To provide the level of care that these folks deserve.
Exactly. And it often means competing with other really important programs.
So it's even if you want to make the move to something better, there are these roadblocks everywhere.
Yeah. And it's not just about the money, right? There's also the question of how do you best serve folks who have really complex needs?
Right. Because community-based care, it sounds great for a lot of people, but what about someone who, needs round-the-clock medical care or has some behavioral challenges that might need, more intensive support?
Definitely. That's a really important consideration. Community-based settings can handle a pretty wide range of needs for sure. But there are those cases where, institutional care, it might still be seen as the only option.
Yeah.
But even then, right? Even if we're talking about institutions, the quality, the conditions, everything we've been discussing.
It all matters.
It has to be part of the equation.
So where does that leave us? I mean, we've gone from shocking abuse, systemic failures, the crazy cost of these places.
Right. It's a lot.
And now this idea of community-based care, which has its own whole set of challenges.
It's complex, right? There aren't any easy answers. And I think that's something that's really important to remember when we're talking about these deep dives, these really complicated issues.
And this is just one piece of a much bigger thing, isn't it? This report, the Texas SSLCs.
Oh, absolutely. This is about so much more than just one state.
Right.
This is about how we as a society care for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what's happening in other states, you know?
Exactly.
Are these Texas problems, or is this like an everywhere problem?
That's what I hope people listening will take away from this.
Yeah.
Start asking those questions, looking closer to home.
So what can people do?
Yeah.
Like if they're hearing this and thinking, okay, wow, I need to, see what's going on in my state, where do they even start?
Well, I think the first step is education, right?
Makes sense.
Learn about how your state handles care for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay.
Are there community-based options? What are the waiting lists like? What kind of funding challenges are there?
Get those facts.
Exactly. And then connect with local organizations.
You mean like advocacy groups?
Yeah, they're often doing amazing work, fighting for better services, increased funding, that shift toward those community-based models we talked about.
And if people, let's say they do their homework and they find out that, yeah, there's room for improvement in their area, then what? What can they actually do about it?
That's where getting involved really matters,
Okay, so like how? Give me some examples.
Well, you can start by making your voice heard.
Like contacting your representative.
Exactly. Tell them this is an issue you care about.
Yeah.
Support policies that promote community-based care and hold institutions accountable.
For providing safe, humane care.
Exactly.
It's like we all have a responsibility here. It gets to speak up for the folks who maybe can't always speak up for themselves.
It's about changing the system, making it better for everyone.
Well, this has been really impactful, I got to say.
Yeah.
Thank you for guiding us through this. It's a tough topic, but it's so important.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here and have these conversations.
And listeners, if you want to dig deeper into this yourself, and we encourage you to, we'll link to the full Texas Watchdog report in our show notes.
Definitely check it out.
This is just the beginning of a much larger discussion, so stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged. Everybody.
Couldn't have said it better myself.